CBS News political contributor Bob Schieffer has covered the Bush family's political fortunes and private contributions to American life for more than 40 years. He spoke to Mrs. Bush in 1988, her first interview after her husband announced he would run for president. Bob is with us from Washington. Bob, so good to have you with us this morning. You think about Barbara Bush, and one of the things that comes to mind is her kids calling her the enforcer.
And she really was. I mean, any one of them would tell you that, you know, their father, they respected him greatly, and they always worried about disappointing him, but they were scared of her. And I can tell you that for a fact. I mean, they loved her to death, but she was the one who made the rules in the family, and she was the one who enforced them. And I'm telling you, she could stare down a grizzly bear. But at the same time, she loved children, and she loved to be around them. When visitors used to come to Kennebunkport in the summertime, she would sometimes sit a 10 or 12-year-old child next to the President of the United States. And she was interested in all children, and especially her children and her grandchildren.
Bob, what struck you about that 1988 interview when you interviewed her when her husband was running for president?
Well, she was, you know, she knew who she was, and she was very comfortable with herself, and she was not afraid to say out loud what other people might be thinking. I mean, there had been a big story going around. Newsweek had run a cover that George Bush was a wimp, and it said overcoming the wimp factor. And I asked her about it in that interview, and she said he's not a wimp, but if he is, we need a lot of wimps because he is one tough wimp.
Bob, she may have been born in New York, but us Texans like to gladly claim her as one of our own. Talk about the role she played as a confidant and advisor to her husband.
Well, she was a confidant who gave her advice to the president. She was not going on television and spelling out what he ought to do or what he ought not to do. But what I always remember her for is, I mean, she didn't suffer fools gladly, and she, at some points, could be very off-putting to people if she didn't agree with them. But she was the mom. She was the one in charge of that family. And, you know, this long life that they had, one of the things that together I think a lot of people don't know about, when George H.W. Bush, her husband, was playing baseball at Yale, she loved baseball, and she used to keep all of his, she kept score, and she had all of the box scores of all the games he played at Yale. She taught George W. Bush how to keep score in baseball. And then when the grandkids came along, she taught them how to keep score. She still had, and I'm supposed somewhere in her property there, she still has all of the box scores of George W. Bush's baseball games when he played in the Little League. She was really a fan right up until the end.
I absolutely love hearing those stories, Bob. You know, in the final days of her life, we learned that while she was battling heart failure, she did also enjoy her favorite bourbon. What does that tell us about Barbara Bush?
And I don't think she'd be ashamed for you to know that, because that's the kind of person she was. She was who she was. And as I say, she was quite a formidable person.
All right, Bob, thanks. May we all have a bourbon at hand after a life like that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bob. The flag at the White House is at half-staff this morning in memory of Barbara Bush. President Trump ordered flags to be lowered at all government buildings and military outposts. The President and First Lady said in a statement that they join the nation in celebrating the life of an advocate of the American family.